Rich and Restless. Chapter 1, The Amazing Wedding. At dawn, the streets and alleys of Spring City are still shrouded in a layer of mist, but the villages are already brightly lit. On that day, it was Lin Jinyu's wedding. She, from an ordinary village girl, was suddenly chosen as the bride by the son of the Zhou family, and this wedding shocked the entire city. Rumor has it that she has a rich life, and the Zhou family was in dire need of a bride to bring good fortune to the family. Lin Jinyu actually didn't have much expectations for this marriage, but she obeyed her parents' arrangement, obeyed the pull of fate, and handed herself over to her fiancé she had only met once, Zhou Zhenhua. On the day of the wedding, the golden wedding dress was full of jewels, which looked particularly dazzling. Lin Jinyu was still a little uneasy in her heart. She was originally the most inconspicuous woman in the village, and she never thought that she would enter such a wealthy life. However, all this beauty was shattered in an instant at dawn the next day. A letter from outside the gate dragged everyone's emotions into endless darkness. Zhou Zhenhua encountered war in the army and unfortunately died. From a bride to a widow in an instant, Lin Jinyu was at a loss. How is this possible? She stood in the middle of the room in the middle of the letter, holding the letter, barely able to believe it. Chapter 2, Unexpected Legacy. The death of the son of the Zhou family means that the wealth and rights of the entire family are inherited by Lin Jinyu. She was propelled overnight to the position of the richest woman in the city. The countless gold, silver, jewelry, fields and manors left by the Zhou family, as well as those family affairs that required her to make decisions, no matter how big or small, made her feel an unprecedented pressure. What kind of life is this meant for me? Lin Jinyu couldn't help but rub her eyebrows. She had never learned how to manage such a large family business. In the past, she only helped the old women in the village to weave some handicrafts, or worked in the fields. How could she adapt to such a life? However, all this came like a tidal wave, and she did not allow the slightest resistance. Mama Zhang, who was in charge, walked in, still holding a thick account book in her hand. "Madam, this is this year's income and expenditure accounts, please take a look." The tone in which she spoke did not carry a trace of emotion, as if Lin Jinyu's identity had already been predestined. Then, another man in charge asked in a low voice, "Madam, all the silk for this season has been purchased, do you want to check the quality? Also, the winter coat style has been designed, which fabric merchant do you want to choose?" Another lady came over, her head bowed, and there was no emotion in her tone. This series of requests and reports made Lin Jinyu feel like she was in an endless whirlpool. Each of these things seemed insignificant, but each of them would affect the lifeblood of the Zhou family. What caught her off guard the most was that the men and women who were supposed to be far away from her came to her desperately, crying and shouting. "Mother!" A little boy of 5 or 6 years old pulled at the corner of her clothes, with tears in his eyes. "Where is my brother?" Lin Jinyu looked down at the little boy, her heart suddenly surged with incomparable emotion. She couldn't bear to refuse his dependence, and her eyes involuntarily moistened. Are you Zhou Zhenhua's son?" she asked, her voice trembling. The boy cried out, "Mother, look for my brother." Lin Jinyu's heart was in turmoil, and at this moment, she felt that her world had collapsed. Not only did she become a widow, but she also had to bear such a heavy responsibility. Chapter 3, Misguided Conspiracy. A few days later, Lin Jinyu had just begun to adapt to her new identity, when she was broken by a sudden news. The Zhou family is not as simple as she thought, with a wealthy background. In fact, the Zhou family has long been surrounded by power struggles, and Zhou Zhenhua's death is not accidental, but an elaborate conspiracy. Lin Jinyu sat in the study, reading the family files, and there were many mysteries hidden in those seemingly ordinary business agreements that she couldn't understand. Doubts began to arise in her heart. Is Zhou Zhenhua's death really so simple? An elder of the family came to her and whispered, "Madam, the Zhou family's financial situation has not been stable in the past few years. If you don't take measures, I'm afraid it will cause an even bigger turmoil." Lin Jinyu felt her heart sink. She knew that what she had just taken over was not only about money and status, but also about a game of life and death. Zhou Zhenhua's death may not be accidental, but closely related to the power struggle in the family. What should I do? Lin Jinyu was extremely anxious in her heart, but she understood that she could no longer escape like in the past, and she had to puff up her chest and meet all this. Chapter 4, Finding the Real Answer. As time passed, Lin Jinyu gradually discovered that behind Zhou Zhenhua's death, a family member she had never heard of was involved, Zhou Zhenhua's uncle, Zhou Mengliang. This relative of the Zhou family, who has been overseas for many years, seems to be inextricably linked to Zhou Zhenhua's death. Lin Jinyu decided to embark on the road of finding the truth herself. During her secret meeting with Zhou Mengliang, she discovered an astonishing fact. Zhou Zhenhua's death was related to his business success and ambitions, and Zhou Mengliang had been doing everything behind his back. You should know that the Zhou family has never had a simple past. Zhou Mengliang's eyes revealed coldness. Of course you won't understand, all this is for the future of the family. Lin Jinyu was shocked. she finally understood that this marriage and death were not only for wealth, but a huge chess game. And she inadvertently became one of the most important chess pieces. Chapter 5, Behind the Wealth. When all the truth gradually surfaced, Lin Jinyu was no longer the innocent little village girl she was at the beginning. She learns to find her place in the power scheme, and eventually succeeds in controlling the Zhou family's finances, bringing new hope to the family. However, all this also made her understand that while having wealth and power, the responsibility and loneliness she bears cannot be avoided. A rich life has countless sacrifices and pains behind it. It's really hard to be the wife of a rich family. Lin Jinyu smiled, but there was helplessness in her eyes. Chapter 6, New Life in the Strife. As Lin Jinyu's control over the Zhou family's finances gradually stabilized, she began to feel pressure from all sides. Zhou Mengliang did not intend to give up, and he secretly controlled a series of commercial and political means to try to compete for true control of the Zhou family. Although Lin Jinyu once doubted whether she could withstand all this, she gradually realized that this game was not only about the struggle for wealth, but also about the wrestling between people's hearts and fate. A month later, Zhou Mengliang's methods became more and more insidious, and he directly provoked disputes between the Zhou family and outside business partners, leaving the Zhou family facing an unprecedented financial crisis. Lin Jinyu stood in a messy study, facing the account lists, her brows furrowed, thinking about countermeasures. If this continues, I'm afraid we're going to go out of business. Lin Jinyu's mood was low, and she couldn't help but wonder if her decision was really correct and whether she could reverse the situation. But just when she feels lost, an unexpected visitor intrudes into her world. Madam, I know you are having a hard time right now, but please listen to me. The person who came was Zhou Zhengua's old acquaintance, a businessman named Lu Shenqi. Lu Shenqi is a friend of Zhou Zhenghua and a long-term partner of the Zhou family. His trip was not to solve the financial crisis, but to bring a secret. Lu Shenqi got straight to the point. I have a copy of Zhou Mengliang's cooperation contract with foreign forces back then. If you are willing to get this evidence, you can reverse the Zhou family's predicament in one fell swoop. This contract made Zhou Mengliang's illegal dealings with foreign powers public, which was not only a commercial betrayal, but also involved in international political struggles. If Lin Jinyu can make it public, Zhou Mengliang's reputation will be ruined, and the Zhou family will get rid of this cancer. But such a choice is not without risks. If this contract is announced, the Zhou family will not only become enemies of the outside world, but may even face retaliation from more powerful forces. Can I win this battle? Lin Jinyu looked at the contract in her hand, and the burden in her heart became heavier and heavier. She is no longer the cowardly village girl, she must make decisions for herself, for the Zhou family, and for her future fate. Chapter 7, Breaking the Game. After careful consideration, Lin Jinyu decided to use the evidence provided by Lu Shenqi as a breakthrough and began to plan a counterattack. She knows that this is not just a business competition, but also a showdown with fate. She chose to leak some of her evidence to local business competitors and used the news to secretly prepare a counter-offensive. However, things moved faster than she expected. Just the day before she was ready to act, Zhou Mengliang suddenly appeared and stood in front of her with a calm attitude. Jinyu, I know what you're doing. Actually, you have long been seen through by me. Zhou Mengliang smiled slightly, with a hint of mockery in his tone. Lin Jinyu's heart was shocked. Her plan was discovered by the other party. Could it be that he had already expected her counterattack? I don't want you to get into trouble, it's all a matter within the family. I just want you to understand that this game is not only a business battle, but also a decision about the future of our family. Zhou Mengliang's tone was calm, but the threat implied in it made Lin Jinyu impossible to ignore. So, you plan to make the Zhou family your pawn? Lin Jinyu responded coldly. She was no longer the timid and cowardly woman she was at the beginning. Her eyes were full of determination and unyielding. Zhou Mengliang was silent for a moment, and finally spoke slowly. I don't want to control the Zhou family, I just want to protect it from threats from the outside world. Your approach may be good, but are you ready to face the real enemy behind it? These words made Lin Jinyu suddenly startled. She realized that Zhou Mengliang was not a simple conspirator, and that there might be a bigger conspiracy behind his actions. She took a deep breath, a glimmer of determination flashing in her eyes. I'll face this, no matter how hard it is. Since this is the arrangement of fate, I will not run away from it. Chapter 8, The Choice Between Blood and Fire. As time passed, Lin Jinyu made Zhou Mengliang's conspiracy public. She did not rely solely on the power of business, but combined her own wisdom with the internal strength of her family to break Zhou Mengliang's strategy step by step. Eventually, she succeeded in uncovering Zhou's illegal dealings with foreign powers, and presented the evidence to the government, which imposed legal sanctions on Zhou. However, all this is not without impeccable. Although Zhou Mengliang was eradicated, the external forces did not intend to let the Zhou family go. Lin Jinyu found that the relationship between the Zhou family and the outside world was far more complicated than she imagined. In this Game of Thrones, no one can win alone. This is a war with no end in sight. Lin Jinyu stood in the hall of the Zhou family, looking at the dawn in the distance, and suddenly understood a lot in her heart. She is no longer the simple woman, but the future guardian of the Zhou family. Her fate will be in her own hands.